Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Denise Brown, or Dr. Denise Brown, and we're going to be talking about her book, The Fairy God Doctor's Guide to a Good Life, a prescription for the working woman. So, Denise, where can people find you?
The World Wide Web, I think, is probably the easiest. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, all the usual suspects. I also have a website, denisesbrown.com. Yeah, all the usual spots.
Because interesting book, because it's partly autobiographical, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it's sort of like I want to say part memoir, part like, oh God, don't do what I did, do this instead. This is probably the way I would describe it.
So what was your inspiration for the book, Denise?
I've had a really interesting career, both as a physician, taking care of people, as an executive, taking care of companies. And I sold a company in the fall of 23 and decided for the first time ever to take a little time off. My kid had just gone off to college and I thought, I deserve a little bit of a break. That lasted about, 6, maybe 8 weeks before I was sort of like, okay, now what should I do? And in the course of an interview for a separate, kind of media thing, someone was like, you ought to write all this down. Like this would be really helpful to me. And I thought, that's sort of interesting. Like I might as well give it a whirl. So that's what I did.
Because you had a really interesting childhood.
I had a very strange
compared to other people. Because you grew up in Los Alamos, and because your parents were part of the Manhattan Project.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a child of two, top secret scientists, and I don't glow in the dark. Although, that used to be one of the things we always worried about. My husband turns out to be from the same town, and we were always kind of like, all right, is this going to work out? Because we've both been here for a long time. So I grew up in a top secret town where nobody talked about work after hours because you weren't allowed to. But that's a really interesting foundation.
And you met the person who's now your husband.
For a long time. Yeah. 28 years, my husband. Yeah.
And you also, as a doctor, you're a doctor as in a medical doctor.
Yes.
And you talk about in the book about how you were going off to med school and the fact that your mum became ill.
Yeah, that was rough. I mean, and that's the kind of like sneak up on you part of the book, but I think it's kind of foundational for the rest of my kind of life. And, they often say that the worst things that happen to you are the best, they're formative. And when I was 23, I came home from a break in school and I had just learned all they call it physical diagnosis is the name of the class. How to take the history and do the physical exam. And this was in a time before everybody just stuck everyone in an MRI kind of type thing. It was really an art and you had to practice it. And so I was showing my mom how I knew all these things and I started listening to her heart and I heard an extra sound that shouldn't have been there. And I thought, well, that's really weird. And so then I started asking her all these questions. Do you get short of breath? Sadly, the answers were yes. And it turned out she had an accumulation of fluid around her heart. And she was kind of an early 50s age woman. And she had like an autoimmune disease like lupus, which can be treated very effectively today, not so much 30 years ago. And she ended up on a medicine that had a bad side effect. And she ultimately died about, less than a year after I had sort of given. I had this kind of strange sense of personal responsibility for this all happening. And it was obviously a tragedy that I had ever in a hole, never. And then I realized that she was but for doing that. And so instead, what I do is kind of take what she brought and try to pay that forward. And I like to say I kind of ahead to my give 0 Fs era. All women arrive at in their 50s, but I jumped ahead at the ripe age of 24, and I realized that the only person who could create a reality or make me happy or enable me to do the things that I wanted to do was going to be me. in partnership with lots of other people, but that I was not going to wait for things to happen to me.
Because you then walk through the book, don't you, in terms of offering advice. Um, uh, so the first thing that you talk about is the fact that satisfaction, not success, is important.
Yeah, I think we all get so wrapped around the trappings, right? The kind of like, oh, the attaboys, the attagirls, I did this, I graduated from here, I graduated from there. Who cares? Like it really doesn't matter. It doesn't keep you warm at night. And so you can do all of those same kind of things. It just depends on what your focus is. Is it bringing you joy? Is it making you happy? Is it making the people around you feel better? Those are my kind of questions that I ask myself. Everyone's got, kind of probably different things that matter most to them. But if you put satisfaction in as the goal that rather than success, it starts to come from the heart and, be much more intrinsically motivated, to quote my buddy Daniel Pink, rather than this kind of external validation of what it is that you're doing. And so I think that turns out to be a lot more long lasting, leads to a lot less burnout.
I think that all of us can be guilty of looking on social media at our friends, and they're all, here I am at this,
Right.
and you can think, oh, I wish I was doing that.
Yeah.
Whereas actually it's about yourself, isn't it? And it's about the people that you love, and having all of those things, rather than actually looking at and seeing that next door if the grass is greener, because it never is.
No, it really isn't. I mean, it's probably just weeds. You can't tell from the distance, right? You've got to get closer before you recognize it for what it is. I think that's really the nail on the head, Tim, because comparison is truly the thief of joy. I talk a little bit about that in the book, and it sets you up for this really kind of toxic triangle of shame and guilt, and it's really quickly to kind of spiral into that. And so to stand up and be like, no, this is what matters to me, and I'm making my choices in service of that. It also just really is freeing, because now you're not really worried about what you should be doing. You're more interested in what you could be doing and how you could do it differently, to bring you the things that you actually want.
So why don't you talk about, I was going to talk a bit later, but you just raised it, about the toxic triangle of comparison, guilt, and judgment. Why don't you talk to us about that?
Well, I mean, I think this sort of social media stuff kind of is the perfect example of that, right? You start comparing yourself to others, which really leads quickly to the whispering campaign. Did you see what she was wearing today? I mean, my goodness, right? So now I'm kind of judgy Judy to everyone else around me. And what does that actually make me feel like? It makes me feel kind of guilty for being a horrible person, maybe, but it also makes me feel guilty for kind of not feeling good enough about what I have. I think, I can't remember if it's Seneca or Cicero or one of these Stoics, is like, the rich man wants what he has. Doesn't matter what that is. But if you want what you actually already have, you're rich in all intents and purposes, spiritually and, kind of financially. So when you sort of start judging others or comparing yourself to others, you're only setting yourself up for failure. I mean, there's no way to win that game. It cannot be won. There is always someone who is smarter, faster, better looking, has more money in the bank.
As a Ferrari.
Cannot win. And that's just not how I want to move through the world.
It's about counting your blessings, isn't it?
It is. It really is. And it's about wanting what you have. That doesn't mean that you sort of become this sort of passive, apathetic human. You can always be ambitious. You can be striving for things, but you really have to understand fundamentally what the motivation is. Are you doing it just because the guy next door bought a new car, or do you really want a new car? Is that really going to make you happy? And if so, then go for it. That's great. I'm not going to tell you. It wouldn't make me happy. I could care less. But if it works for you, that's great. And I think that's the part of it where is the hard work, is you really have to kind of spend some honest time with yourself, understanding what it is that really does motivate you, what really does make you happy. Most of us don't spend time thinking about that.
Because you talk about in the book about no balance, don't you? And talking about working out which plates to spin and which plates to drop.
Absolutely. We have this, and I think women in particular, we accumulate these plates and these different things, like almost not
Work,
realizing it.
family,
Yeah,
career.
and then, oh, there's this at the job, or there's, oh, can you be in charge of the party at school? Or, and you just sort of say, oh yes, and a little bit of it's a little ego boost. You're like, oh, I'm so good at what I do that they're asking me to do more. But you kind of accumulate them almost subconscious or unconsciously. And all of a sudden you're overwhelmed and you can't keep them all spinning. And sadly, the things that usually fall off, let's be honest, right, are the people closest to you, because you sort of feel like, oh, I can't disappoint my boss or the president of the school ladies society or whatever. So you put your energy there, but your partner or your kid, like, oh, they'll understand. Well, like, you do that for long enough, and that's a recipe for disaster one way or another. And so my theory is you can only do so many things at once. You can certainly ask other people to work with you, which, is kind of the great multiplier in terms of plate spinning. But you have to have some that are just kind of sacrosanct, that kind of like fine china that you would never let drop down. And the other ones, they bounce, they break, you can glue them back together again, whatever it is. But those fundamental things, like those are the precious things. And for me, it was kind of like my own personal well-being, my family, and friends. And then work has always been my sort of number 4 plate. And if you look externally at my career, I went to very prestigious universities. I did all of the big name, residencies. I ran a huge practice that was across the country that had, thousands of physicians working with me. Ran a company. I've done all of the external things, but that was never my top priority ever, and never would be. Because they don't talk about that when you die, like all the great work
Because
that you did.
just going back to what you said about getting external help, you talk in the book about how, I can't remember how it came about, but you ended up doing, was it every Tuesday?
Yeah, Tuesday was my day. So I got together with a couple of the other women on my street, and I think it was just a random night, kind of out standing around in the front yard or something. And I was like, I coming home from work and then making dinner I'm going to lose my mind, and I just sort of said it like I don't even really know these ladies. I'm just like, it is driving me insane. And sure enough, right away, the other 2 women were like, oh my God, me too. Like, I just can't think of what to make. And I'm just like, every day. And I was like, well, what if we didn't have to work so hard? Like, what if we did this together? And we all kind of looked at each other, and she's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, I mean, Jenny she's a therapist, and she didn't work on Mondays. I was like, well, what if you cooked on Monday? And I usually take Tuesday off because it's my day to volunteer at the kids' school. I could do Tuesday. And then my neighbor Steph was like, I'll do Wednesday. And we just decided we would try it out. And so instead of having to make dinner every night in a row, we sort of bought glass containers, and we were like, the rule was drop the dinner off on the front porch at 5:30. If you have time to say hello, great. If not, just literally leave it and go. Obviously, this was in a pre-DoorDash, Uber Eats era. Nevertheless, I mean, you can go broke quick doing that every night. And that was it. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, now I only have to think of one thing to make a week. And, it's just kind of this like great unlifter. And then we were quickly trying to figure out how we could do that in lots of other kind of
And I think you
avenues.
did it. I told my mum that. She said, oh, I wish I'd thought about that one, because she did the other one that you did, which is the
Babysitting.
babysitting. Yeah, she actually did a thing where you got 5 credits or something, and you basically bartered the credit, for.
I love it. I love it.
And you did something similar, didn't you?
Yeah, well, so once the dinner thing really kind of took off, we were like, well, this is great. Now we got Wednesday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday covered. Friday is like pizza night or whatever. Like, all we have to do is kind of like scavenge around with leftovers for Thursday. And then we were like, well, let's do this with the babysitting stuff too. And so it was like each of us had 2 kids. So it was like you took care of 6 kids. Now, granted, we're Americans, so we do things earlier than you Brits do. But like from 6 to 9 on Friday night, like all the kids could be at my house. And the rule was like everybody's been in the bath and are in their pajamas by the time, the evening is over. And you could go, 3 nights 3 Friday nights out of the month, you got to go out with your friends or your spouse or whoever, and the kids were taken care of, and we just didn't have to worry about it. And so we just kind of kept adding stuff like that, where it was like, wow, this is so much easier. And I think that's the real key, is that, you can have it all, you just can't do it all. So you have to find people to kind of go along the journey with you. And I think it was maybe it was easier back in the good old days, right? When we all had a village and there were multiple generations near one another, you had a little bit more resource surrounding you than we do in this very mobile, very work from home world. But you just have to be the person to go out and create it. It won't fall in your lap.
You talk in the book also about the fact that life's non-linear.
Yeah.
And you also asked the question about, should I freeze my eggs? And from a women's perspective, and I think that it's important that people think about the fact and understand the fact that it's non-linear. That life is non-linear.
I think there's such a especially with younger kids, sort of the Gen Z stuff. They've been brought up to do, you do your test prep, and then you go to, and life just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't, if you will. So the real idea of it is trying to embrace those kind of ventures off into the wilderness, if you will, because those are real opportunities for personal growth, but also career growth you just don't expect at the time. But if you decide it's all supposed to be one way, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment.
Yeah. I think if anyone thinks that, they're going to do this job and then the next job and then and then we're going to be CEO, and I know there's an expectation that might happen, but my partner's sons have decided that they don't want to be the CEO or whatever, or they actually are passionate about, they've actually decided to follow their passion.
Yeah, good for them. I think it's great. I mean, I think that's definitely like one of the things I love the most about this sort of, kind of Generation Z or whatever we're supposed to call it, is that they have seen us Xers really kind of like get burnt out and fried and get divorced and all of the things, right? And like everyone, kind of rail against your parents, like make different choices. I think that's awesome. Good for them. I think there's a balance, right? There's somewhere in the middle, and the middle path is always the most difficult path to walk. But if you decide that your career isn't going to be if then and one thing after another, and you recognize that opportunities come up and you're open to them, I think you end up with a much more vibrant kind of experience than just kind of staying on the rail. And, certainly medicine is a very typically stay on that track and you just keep on it. And some of that selects a certain kind of person, right, who really enjoys that. That was not me. And so when I had the opportunity to suddenly kind of start doing more strategy work and business development, I was like, well, I don't really know how to do that. I haven't trained for it, but I have an innate sense of what makes sense. Yeah, I'll give it a rip, and that ended up taking me on a journey that I never would have expected, and probably would be here talking with you about if I hadn't just thought, that sounds interesting. And so I think that's the kind of part about nonlinear. And sometimes, women want to take time off if they have kids and they are in the financial position to do so. That's great. But I think it becomes a source of stress for them. It's like, how do I re-enter the workforce? No one's going to want me. Like, no, that's not true at all. Like I'd much rather hire someone who'd been at home and took care of a family and got everybody, and like that. Those are skills and real life knowledge that you don't get sitting in a university seminar. It just doesn't happen that way.
Denise, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book, The Fairy God Doctor's Guide to a Good Life, a prescription for the working woman. If we wanted to buy a copy, where could we get one?
Well, I think your easiest spot's probably Amazon, Barnes & Noble too, online. The Audible book, I narrated myself. If you listen to it at time and a half, I hear it takes 3 hours. It is pretty funny. Yeah, just wherever you normally find your books.
And where can we find you?
So the easiest is probably Instagram. You can find me at Fairy God Doctor, or LinkedIn, Denise S. Brown, MD on LinkedIn. And my website, same thing, DeniseSBrownMD.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about the book. Really
Thanks
loved
for
it.
having me.
And I love the way that you structured it in terms of the autobiography, because it comes from the heart, doesn't it? As well as the head.
It does. It does. We are who we are.
We are. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you so much, Denise.
Thanks for having me, Tim.